The weekly Industry Angel podcast hears from business leaders and entrepreneurs who share their stories and that all-important light bulb moment. This can inspire us all and maybe scratch that itch and kickstart that idea that keeps you awake at night. Welcome to episode 50 of the Industry Angel. We've got a mind-blowing episode for you this week. Quick shout out to my hometown football team, South Shields FC. You might remember I interviewed the chairman on episode 42 and we were talking about the dream of going to Wembley in the FA Vase. We didn't want to jinx it. We were quite nervous about talking about it. Well, nervous no more. We are there. We'll be in London this weekend, the 20th of June. Exciting times. I'll be there with my son Luke, my dad, a big bunch of friends. Oh man, it's going to be exciting. So please cross your fingers that the trophy comes back home with us. Right, we've got quite an episode to get through today. So be prepared to be inspired to the max. Today we have fellow podcaster, keynote speaker, change evangelist, and you may know him better as iSocial Fans. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Brian Fanzo.
Thank you for having me. And I will warn people, my accent is not near as beautiful as yours, and I talk fast. So anytime I'm on a podcast, I always like to caveat with people that if you listen to your podcast in 1.5 times or 2 times, you might want to just leave it in the normal speed or maybe even slow it down because I'm one that likes to talk fast. But I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we kind of connected on social, I guess, a little over a year ago, and we were trying to lock in a date and we weren't able to make it happen, but I'm glad we're able to make it happen today.
Well, Brian, you're a big traveler, so I'm glad we got it again because I think you're going to be traveling quite a lot lately doing your keynote speaking, yeah?
Yeah, I am. I did a little over 50 events last year in 11 different countries, and this year it will be probably close to the same. I don't know. I don't think it'll be 11 different countries. I think it seems to be I'm going back to the same countries a couple of times, but I'm blessed to be able to travel the world and speak as well as work with some big brands. So I'm actually in my home office outside of Washington, D.C. right now, but I'm about to embark on a 4 weeks in a row on the road around the United States before some more international travel this summer.
You're in Washington, but aren't you a Pittsburgh guy, or? I
am. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. I bleed black and gold colors, so my Pittsburgh Penguins. I played hockey in college, so I'm a big hockey fan as well as a NFL football fan. The football you don't play with your feet, right? That we're the ones that kind of screwed up.
Yeah. So Pirates, Steelers, Penguins.
Oh, yeah. Yes, everything black and gold. But I went to college and high school in Virginia, and then when I moved to Arizona, I had my 3 daughters out there in Arizona, and now back in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC area. So works good. I used to work for the government. I got a lot of connections and friends here. So I'm a 4-hour drive to Pittsburgh, which isn't bad. I'm a 2-hour drive from the beach. So it works. It works well, and it keeps me close to family and easy airports in and out.
Well, we don't travel much in the UK. It's funny you guys will think nothing about jumping in the car for 4 hours. That's half our country.
Which is true. I do a lot over there, and I always laugh at that part of it because, like, for us, we have that. Not only do we cross states very easily, but when I have a gig in New York and Chicago, it was a 12-hour drive between the two last year, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna rent a car and drive across. And I remember I had stopped and I was doing some live streaming, and everyone from the UK that was following me is like, what are you doing? Like, why are you driving? Like, that's like driving across like 5 countries here. And so, for me, I really love traveling. I miss my daughters when I travel, but thankfully for technology and FaceTime and things, I can still share and engage with them when I'm on the road. But I just love seeing the world. I love meeting new cultures, and I've been very blessed. I've been to over 70 countries, with my previous life doing a lot of traveling for the government here in the U.S. and now as a speaker. So I enjoy and take any speaking and travel opportunities that I possibly can.
Well, listeners might have heard you mention those digital platforms, Brian, because they're very close to your heart. I mean, I think we're live on Periscope at the moment.
We are. We're backstage on Periscope. I've since Periscope, well, actually Meerkat came out first, but since the South by Southwest explosion of live streaming, I've done a little over 1,800 live streams. So you're one of those 1,800 right now streaming on my Periscope account to the listeners out there. So hopefully we'll drive some new listeners to your show.
Excellent stuff. Well, you've addressed organizations across, this last couple of years, like IBM, SAP, Dell, Samsung. So what are the popular topics, Brian, that you've been asked to talk about? Is it live video now?
So it's interesting, live video became kind of like the sexy ask because live video is, in my opinion, the rawest and the most connected piece of marketing that we've ever had. There's nowhere else that you are more vulnerable. There's nowhere else that you are, if you have someone trolling you or making comments while you're live, they get an instant reaction. Where if a customer comments on a blog or even they tweet back at you or they reply to your email newsletter, you're not live on responding, right? And so live video from a technology perspective was interesting because I think people thought they wanted to know about Periscope and Facebook Live and how to tell stories on Snapchat and Instagram stories. But really what I present on and what I work with all of these brands on is how do you share your story? How do you convey authenticity? And how do you do it in a way that drives business results, but also kind of builds with that community? Because I like to tell everybody, a lot of what I talk about is for the last 9 years or so, we have worked really, really hard at getting further and further away from our customer, from our clients, and from our community. We've gone out of our way to almost put a barrier. We added a website, and then we kind of stretched ourselves away from the human aspect. And in 2017, the consumer has so much power with so many channels to choose from and so much data that's out there that we now have to come full circle. We're almost looping back around. And I think live video is the catalyst for us coming back to a more real life experience online. I don't think of my friends that I met online as online friends. Those are friends, right? Those are connected. I don't disconnect online and offline. But to truly do that, you have to shrink that barrier from the online world to your community. And live video does that. But to kind of answer your question, what I talk about, and my first book, my upcoming book, will be out this fall. And the title of the book is A Millennial Mindset. But it has nothing to do with about the year someone is born. I break it down into two categories: digital natives or digital dinosaurs. And the way that I really kind of introduce that is, if you are open to digital change, you understand the importance of collaboration, and honestly, you believe that the future of business is community, you're a digital native. And that's what I talk a lot. So when I'm working with IBM, next week I'm hosting the SAP event in Orlando. I work with Dell. I hosted Dell EMC World. I speak at all these events. Really what I'm helping them do is decrease the barrier between offline and online, help them tell their story where their audience is, and then ultimately at the end of the day, I help them embrace change, community, and collaboration. Because if you can embrace those three, it doesn't matter if you're doing live video, YouTube video, social media, you're doing consulting, all of those things will kind of fall into this new bucket in this digital world. So, a lot of my presentations now are around what this millennial mindset concept, which, for me, I'm a millennial, but I'm barely a millennial. I always tell people I'm a pager-wearing millennial, which a pager-wearing millennial doesn't mean I wear one today, but I had a pager growing up. When I graduated college, Facebook was not out yet, and so I couldn't even get a Facebook account for like 5 years or so because you had to have a .edu email address. And I think the reason I say that is because for so many people, they assume millennials were born on Facebook with an iPhone in their hand, and so I love to kind of put a little bit juxtaposition to that kind of stereotype. And then on top of that, what I like to kind of do is I really do believe I love change. I love chaos. I love helping people embrace change. So that's where I'm focused now. I have a couple different keynotes on that, speaking all around the millennial mindset. But that doesn't mean I don't speak sometimes about social media storytelling or live video, because I truly do love the power of live video.
I'm really pleased that you mentioned the mindset, Brian. I wrote a blog recently about millennials because it's starting to really get a dangerous term. I mean, I've had a couple of emails from millennials, but they start the email with, "Hi, my name's Dan. I'm a millennial and I do this." And like, I've never. I think the last time I mentioned how old I was 13 and 3/4 and I was going for a paperboy job. It's meaningless how old you are, you know?
Well, and I think that, you know, and I'll put this out there for everyone that's listening. If you are measuring yourself or your audience, like if you're building a persona and you're using only one data point, and that data point happens to be one that you have zero control of, aka the day or year you were born, that's your parents' job. Your parents decided that for you. If you're using that as a measurement stick or as something that you're equating yourself to, like, you are guaranteed to fail. You're doing it completely wrong. So to me, that makes my skin crawl a little bit, because I think for so many people out there, you know, I'm proud to be a millennial. It's on my bio, it's on my website, but a millennial doesn't define who I am. It just is something that allows me to kind of, you know, redefine that conversation around age, around personas. And let's face it, who likes to be labeled? I don't think anybody, not one listener out there is like, please label me with, you know, like the stereotype or type of person I am.
Definitely. I've never run around calling myself a Gen X, but, you know, I'm on the blog, I was talking about the fact my mother, they live in India, so, you know, we'll FaceTime. She messes around on Snapchat with my daughter.
Love
Dad's
it.
on Skype, you know, betting on horses from the other side of the world, you know, and it just goes right across the ages. You know, look at something like what you're doing now. You're a millennial, okay? I'm Gen X. What about a mutual friend of ours, Ted Rubin, some of the stuff he's doing, talking about return on relationship? You know, it spans right across, doesn't it?
It does. And I tell you what, Ted Rubin had a massive impact on me when I was pivoting my career about 6 years ago. You know, I read that Return on Relationships, and I have a podcast episode for Monday that's going out that is all about, you know, relationships are really I would say 90% of my business right now is inbound on relationships that people are feeding me business, speaking opportunities, and Ted is a great guy. Ted went from someone that I read his book and I reached out to him on Twitter to we built a super strong relationship to where my daughters call him Uncle Ted. So if that's not an example of the power of you know, online, offline relationships, you know, I don't know what is. And I love, you know, those mutual connections like someone like Ted. It's no surprise that you are as well you know, linked to him, because there's some great people, and thanks to digital, we're able to connect with these great people around the world.
Definitely. I mean, you know, you mentioned about live video. I think live video is really impacting that now. You know, you get to feel like you know the person. So, Brian, you know, you talk about your daughters a lot. You talk about sport a lot. You get to know the man behind the mask, don't you?
For sure. And, you know, I launched an online course in February, and it's called Be Yourself. And the whole concept was so many people wanted, you know, access and time to me and said, "Hey, Brian, how did you grow your following? How did you build your digital community?" You know, I had 2,000 followers on Twitter in October of 2013. And I remember sitting at my desk. I was working at a startup at the time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start telling my story everywhere and anywhere I can. And the problem was I hated social media at that time, because what I was being online took a lot of work. Like, I was actually trying to convey, and you know, one of the things I always told myself was like, what do people want to hear from me? What do people want from me? And really, social media at the time I hated, because it was a lot of work, like just to craft a tweet or a blog. And in October of 2013, I decided, you know what, if I'm going to tell my story and I'm going to really go all in, I can't be anything else other than myself. And so I started sharing more about my daughters and my, you know, the fact I have tattoos, my diagnosis with ADHD, and the fact that was a major impact on my life at 31 years old. And so when people started asking me, Brian, what are the two things that you would link to the reason that you're successful? And I always said there was two things. I said, be yourself. I was always myself online and offline. And I would find ways to show I cared a little bit more than anyone else, right? Anybody can hit a retweet. Anybody can, you know, post a comment on a Facebook post, but who can go a little bit further? Who can go and look at your most recent blog and kind of dig a little deeper? And so those were my two secrets for me. It was the little bit of honesty, a little bit of that element of be yourself, because I share my struggles. If you follow me on Snapchat, you know this more so than anywhere else. I've cried on Snapchat as an entrepreneur when you're going through the highs and lows. I've celebrated my wins. I've taken you you backstage with me. And it's really a lot of fun. I always say that, for me, the storytelling aspect of social media, so much of that comes down to this idea that I have really group therapy at my disposal at all times, because so many people know so much about me that they're able to come along on the journey. And my goal is always, if I tell people just what I do, like, hey, I got this speaking gig, or hey, this is how I got here, that doesn't really help anybody, right? But I focus on why am I doing what I'm doing, and then how did I make that happen? Because this is how I envision it, right? If you're helping people by sharing your why and your how, people are able to learn along with you. And not only will they learn with you, but they will become your champions and your advocates, because they feel a part of it, but they also feel that you're making them better by simply sharing both the good and the bad. And I will caveat this, though, that, when you start being yourself online, and I say this, in one of my keynotes, if you suck, if you're not a good person, don't be that person online, right? Like, pick somebody else to be. Like, don't be yourself. if you were a bad human, don't be yourself. But on the same side is, there comes a lot of risk with that vulnerability, because I had a client that was very not okay with the fact that I have tattoos, and the fact that I wear a backwards hat on stage. And they kind of came to me, and we kind of just came to an agreement that, it was probably not the best working partnership, and we were going to part our ways. And I wasn't at a place in my business, and I'm still not today, where I can afford to, lose clients just because. But for me, they probably weren't the best client long-term anyhow, because they didn't kind of, believe and embrace my same values. So I always like to caveat, whenever I talk about being yourself and vulnerable and telling the truth online, I want to make sure people know that it'll come with some heartache. It'll come with some failure. It'll come with some things that you'll be surprised with, that people that you've been connected with and you thought, were big fans of you, because all of a sudden they saw your whole picture, they might change their opinion. But I will tell you, for every one person that changed their opinion negatively, I had 100 people that changed their opinion positively. And I'm very thankful for that, because it's really what's allowed me to kind of grow my business as well as my brand across the world.
You did right. I mean, you know that I speak about stress, and I've been there, and I speak about burnout. I talk about the high suicide rates. That's my kind of calling now, because I've been there and I shared that. I've heard people, yesterday actually, I was watching an online seminar, and the lady told me she had a problem with drugs. Well, not me, told the audience she had a problem with drugs. And I was like, wow, I never seen that coming. People are sharing that they've had problems with alcohol. And people now are just being really honest, they put the jeans on one leg at a time, and they are who they are. And I guess if you don't like that person, as you've said, Brian, and if they walk away, then they walk away. There hasn't been a good cultural fit between you anyway.
Correct. And actually, it's funny. My most recent podcast episode. So I host 2 podcasts, but the solo one is called FOMO Fans, FANZ, or a Z at the end. And the whole idea is that I try to cure your FOMO, or your fear of missing out. And episode 31 that just went live this week, the title of it is "Don't Be a Dick." And
I love that rant.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, that's not. I don't use vulgarity or profanity just because, but it was in this transparent, authentic world that we're living in. The reason that rant came to life is that as we become more vulnerable, as we start sharing all of these things, it does give the bad people, the dicks, the opportunity to really take advantage of us at a level we've never seen before, right? Because now you have access into a lot more of what makes me tick, what makes me happy, what makes me sad. But I believe, as a culture, as a community, as a world, that we are honestly good people. And so I was really fired up for that rant, because I wanted to stress to people that don't give up being vulnerable, don't give up being transparent and authentic just because there are bad people in the world. There will always be bad people in the world that are taking advantage of other people. Let's focus on the good things and the good people, and I believe we will drown out the bad by just doing that alone. But it was a little frustrating. So this hits really close to home, because if you listen to that rant, it was I was fired up, because I really do believe that the more authentic we are online, the more we allow people in to know who we are, the happier we will be and the more successful our businesses will be. But it does come with a little bit of risk because unfortunately nothing will fix stupid or stop bad people from doing bad things.
But you know that rant that you went on, okay? You did that because of the feedback from your audience that liked to hear that honesty from you. You know, they said to you, Brian, I love it when you rant. And that kind of gave you the opportunity to then rant and think, actually, the audience do like it. You know, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so empowering. You know, I can tell, you know, even from that episode, right? That episode was 4 days ago from when we're recording this. And I might have received, I would say close to 100 messages between the channels of people either thanking me, or I actually had a senior executive of a Fortune 50 company send me a really nice Facebook instant message today, which is always funny, right? Because now if you think of it that way, a Fortune 50 senior executive is Facebook messaging me. But he Facebook messaged me. He said, Brian, you know, I love your content. You know, I've been trying to catch up. I've been backlogged, but I listened to your most recent podcast before I went to bed. And he's like, I ended up going up and I wrote 4 pages in my journal, and you inspired me to take a different approach with my employees. And for me, it was like, all I did was simply share my own thoughts, and I try to do it in a very positive way. Like the word rant sometimes gets associated with people that like to break down other people, or like to, you know, I would say, quote unquote, be like complaining. I don't look at ranting as complaining. I look at ranting as highlighting and giving a very personal opinion about a topic, but not being closed-minded enough to say that I'm not believing that my opinion is the only opinion or the correct opinion, but it's definitely something that I have to share. And it's really cool to see and to feel that when you just share yourself and you share your thoughts, you know, I will say every day that if I can impact one person, just one, every day with a tweet or a video or a blog post, or maybe they're watching an old keynote of mine, if I can impact one person every day, I will sign up for 365 lives I changed a year. And I think everyone would, right? And I think sometimes we get caught up in the vanity numbers. And I even qualified, you know, I said in 2013, I had less than 2,000 followers. I now have over 100,000 followers on Twitter. But the number of followers don't matter to me as much, only in the fact that now I have more opportunities to impact those one-on-one people at a larger reach. But it's still, for me, it's that one. I mean, that Facebook message I got this morning will motivate and inspire me for this entire day. And that's not because I have a big reach and a big following. It's because you impacted one person. I think that's what I love what I do. That's why I'm so passionate about this idea of the millennial mindset and helping people embrace change, because once that light bulb goes off and you're able to have these type of moments and build these type of relationships, man, it's empowering, it's life-changing, and I really do think it's shaping the world to be a good place. At least I keep telling myself that, having 3 daughters under 7. I like to believe that they're growing up in the greatest of times, and I'm going to try my best to make that happen.
It's great. I mean, on the last episode that I ran, I did mention that feedback is your oxygen, isn't it? It's why you do it. And there's nothing better than getting an email through or a tweet and just giving you that feedback. I did hear on, might have been your last episode, you read out a review from iTunes.
I did. So yeah, that was my last episode. And for me, this is one of those things that's really interesting because I'm really dialed in, to the community. Twitter is my favorite platform. Every single tweet that has ever been replied out of my Twitter account, which I don't know what the number is now. I can pull it up in a second. But I have 151,000 tweets. Every one of them have come from me from a standpoint of replies. That I do schedule content, but every reply and part of the interesting thing about feedback is, and the reason I'm bringing this up when I read that review because when someone comes back to me and says, Brian, I love your podcast, it's great to say yes or just repost that or say thanks for listening. But you'll notice, and people that you can follow me on Twitter and see it, I reply back usually and say, thanks so much. What was your favorite episode? And what would you love to hear me talk about future episodes? Because oftentimes we don't know that people care about our feedback. And us as the creators, as a podcaster, as a business, it's amazing if you just simply ask for feedback. The people will jump at the opportunity, but for a lot of people, we sit there and say, we have no idea what our customer wants. We have no idea what our listeners want. And I always just come back and say, did you ask them? And they're like, oh, that's a novel concept, right? But it is one of those things that, for me that, I asked for feedback, and usually when I ask for feedback and then I talk about it on the air, I say, I would love for you to give me a review on iTunes and share your thoughts. And someone gave me a great review on there, and it inspired that podcast, because she simply said, Brian, I followed you on live video for a long time. I love your podcast. My favorite thing on live video that you don't do in podcasting as much is rant about topics that are really close to you. And I said, you know what? I got that feedback Monday morning. I had already had an episode planned for that day on collaboration. And this is another big piece for me, that if you want to really embrace the real-time aspect, just go with it. Like, I had already planned an episode, and I didn't want to change that episode because it was already planned in my content calendar. So what I did was I recorded 2 episodes that day. And, it's an interesting space, because traditionally, you would have been like, okay, I want to put that in my calendar, I'm going to change. But I was like, you know what? She gave me feedback on that Monday. It inspired me. I said, you know what? I'm going to do that. And I jumped in and did it. And the results and the feedback have been amazing. And I think for me, I credit that I have an amazing community, that I've built the reputation, or I guess the line and the bar of measurements to say, if you tweet at me, if you send me a tweet and and it's not just, hey, Brian, or Brian, please share my post or retweet something, but if you're actually asking me a question or you're engaging with me, I guarantee it 100% that I will reply. I will not miss your tweet. And
you put that out there now, man.
I am. And I it's much like, Ted Rubin puts his phone number he always says his phone number on stage, and he says, I dare you to call me. And he's like, 4 of you will call me tomorrow, and then nobody will call me 10 days from now. And I'm putting that challenge out there right now. If you tweet at iSocialFans, fan with a Z at the end, you tweet at me and with a question, a comment, a concern, I will guarantee that I will reply back.
I always say this to clients, Brian, about putting time aside, and I don't know how you feel about this. I'm quite spontaneous, so if someone tweets me, I'll tweet them back. But I also say to clients, make sure you've got 30 minutes, morning, afternoon, evening, and just go through your social channels and just engage. Because the worst thing I've seen is brands who are just broadcasting. You've seen them, but I bring up some examples when I'm doing a little bit of coaching around social, and we've got Asda here, which is Walmart, and they're really good at coming back. And just for a joke, one day I was with the kids in Asda, and I took a photograph of this really sad-looking birthday cake of an elephant, and then backwards and forwards, Asda, Walmart were just passing me tweets back and forth about it, but they're just amazing. They're just on it, like Amazon, really good customer service when you chat with them. They're just on it. But you see some of these brands and it's just a one-way street. Broadcasting, they're not picking up the other end of the telephone, are they?
No, and one of my keynotes, I talk about, I say the field of dreams is broken. And if you're familiar with the Kevin Costner movie, Field of Dreams, the tagline on that movie.
I'm too young for that, Brian.
Oh, you're too. No, well, I say I quote What About Bob, and I quote Field of Dreams in my keynotes, and I always laugh. I'm like, not many millennials or Gen Zers will know what I'm talking about. But the idea in Field of Dreams was, if you build it, they will come. And today, that is not the case. If you build a website, if you have a great, that is broken. That's the old way of doing it. You now have to go to where your audience is. And here's the tricky part: not market, not sell. You actually have to listen, engage, maybe learn something, and provide value. And then what will happen? Well, people will all of a sudden build that relationship with you and understand that you're an authority, and they'll come to you saying, how can I buy your product? How can I hire you? And that's a completely shift. And if you're listening to this right now and you're like, this guy is a crock, that's not the way it is. It is the way it's changing, but it wasn't that way the last couple of years. So it's not something that like, hey, if you weren't doing this, you were doing it wrong. It's just now, if you think of it this way, my grandfather growing up in Pittsburgh, he had one TV channel, or he had 3 TV channels, but he didn't have a remote control. So he always said he had one TV channel. Right now we have 500 TV channels, 500 blogs. We have 448 apps on our phone. We also have as many possible distractions as we can. So now it's, how do I capture that attention? How do I bring people in? And the tricky part is, if you go to them and you provide that value, that's where advocacy happens. That's where you're able to create these evangelists for you. And so for me, this is one of those things that it is a complete shift. But if you as a business are willing to do it, the results are going to be mind-blowing, because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be marketed to, or what did my favorite brand post on their website? Nobody does that. Like, that doesn't even exist. So why are we treating it that way? And the last thing I wanted to say is, I know you're across the pond, and I was just in Denmark, and I've fallen in love with Copenhagen. Copenhagen is now my favorite city in the world to visit. I've been there now twice, and I can tell you I love that city. But I always heard in the UK, and even when I was in Australia and the Middle East, where, hey, we're a couple years behind the US in marketing or social media. And I'm going to call a little bit of BS on that now. I'm going to call a little bit of challenge, because I believe the digital world has really leveled the playing field. And I think a lot of the things that the UK and the Middle East and Australia especially as well, they're doing a lot of these things even more innovative than we are in the US. But we in America are really good at pounding our chests and bragging about what we do, where other cultures, they're a little bit more humble, and they try to let their work speak for themselves. So, for your audience, especially the audience that is international, the more I travel international, the more I work with these big brands, the more I connect, the more I realize that you're doing great things. Don't look at what, hey, this brand's doing something on Snapchat with influencers and we're not that innovative. Those things are, there's all of this kind of level of competition. And I think, one of the places that the reason I love live video, and if your audience is like, man, I want to get ahead. How do I leapfrog? Maybe you weren't on social media. Maybe you haven't been doing customer service with where your audience is at, but you want to jump back into this. I tell you, live video is the place, because it is the place where you can drop the barrier and you can start building relationships online at scale we've never seen before. And I always say, for me, building a relationship on Twitter, we were talking about Ted Rubin beforehand, it took me 18 months to really build a strong relationship with him via Twitter. And then, we got on a couple phone calls, we met in person. But if you're doing live video with your audience and your audience is able to see the people behind your company, I would argue that relationship is built in 30, 45, or 90 days, because they're going to figure out if they like you, they trust you, if they understand what you're talking about very quickly. And that's a great thing, unless what you sell and what you talk about is not true, and you can't back up what you're actually providing. If that's the case, stay away from live video. Don't get into live video. But for me, it is this new arena. It's not about marketing at people or talking at people. And you have a background in sales. Sales. My dad was a candy salesman. He sold peanut brittle candy, and he believed always that it was a handshake. You look someone in the eyes. And I will say, one of the things that one of my good friends, Jim Keenan, he's a great sales guy out there. If you guys don't follow him, it's Keenan on Twitter. He's just a ball of fun. But Keenan always caveat. He said, yes, the old tagline that people do business with people they like, but they also do business with people they have no feeling with, but they don't do business with people they don't like. And I told him, I actually messaged him the other day, and I said, I'll actually change that and say people do business with people they like, but they also do business with people they can relate to. And I think that relate to space has so much area to gain in the sales arena, because you don't have to like the person. You don't even have to fully believe in everything they're doing. But if you can relate with them, that that they put their shoes on the same way you do, and they're working as hard as they are, and they believe in what they're doing, you will be interested in buying from them. And I think it's kind of this new path to sales. It's you buy from people you like, but you're also going to buy from people that you can relate to. And you're really not going to buy from people that you don't like. And then the newest piece is you're not going to, the old way of, if I don't have a website or if I'm not on social media, then people will contact me via phone and I won't lose anything. That's changed. If you are not where your audience is, it doesn't come across as they have to come find you. It comes across as you don't care.
Sure.
And I don't think any brand, any leader out there right now is saying, wow, I want my customers and my community to think I don't care. But sadly, a lot of businesses and a lot of brands are acting that way.
I say this all the time to clients. There's no choice now of doing social media. It's just expected, and you just have to do it. The worst thing I see now from clients, Brian, is what's the ROI? That's what they immediately ask.
Well, and I love that question, because, I always challenge back, what's the ROI of a billboard ad? we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to put a billboard on the side of the street, and then we calculate the possible total number of cars that will drive by it, and we say that is awareness. Yet we have no idea how many people actually looked up there. Let's face it, we also have the distracting driving. We also have people that pass by that road every single day, and once they see the billboard once, they're sure as heck not going back up there and looking again. And so one of the things I like to caveat with the social media side is if you're going to measure ROI in social, you have to start cataloging and tracking the data of everything. And I have a great example for that because I worked in a data center company, like one of the least sexy technology industries that exist. And we had a cloud computing product. So we were migrating from the data center into the cloud. And I was using social to really build relationships across the plan. And I built my job to be a technology evangelist. And I have something that I call screenshot awesomeness. And so if you're listening to this is something in my online course that I break down. But what it really means is every good comment you get, the reason that I read that podcast review on the air was because I screenshotted it. Every time you do something good, you get a nice email back. You get somebody that tweets you. I even do it where I will leave a business meeting or a networking lunch, and I will take a picture, and then I will put a caption on that picture and say, this is what happened. And I put all of that into a folder, and I screenshot everything that's awesome that's happened along the way. And then whenever someone comes to me and says, what's the ROI? Or for the example I wanted to share with the data center was, I was building this relationship, and all of a sudden I found out that our company was bringing on this large company called CenturyLink on as a customer, and they eventually became as a partner. And one of the things that was interesting was I went back to my I call it my portfolio of awesome, and I started going through all of these screenshots, and I started to realize that two of the senior VPs of that company started following us on Twitter and were engaging with our content. And so I reached out to them, and we was congratulating them on, coming on as a partner of ours. And I walked into the boardroom that evening, and I told them, I was like, I remember that, we connected on Twitter, and I just wanted to say how cool that was that we went back and forth. And in the board meeting, the person stood up and said, we're not sure we would have known what IO Data Centers was doing if it wasn't for having that social engagement with us early on, because that was our first entry. And this is a hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a B2B play, but it was a conversation, right? And so for me, when someone says the ROI, there's the ROI for you right there, right? Like hundreds of millions of dollars in a partnership that ultimately started with a tweet about content. But if you're not tracking that and you're not willing to play the long game and understand all of these measurements, sure, ROI is hard to track. But if you understand all of these aspects and where you build relationships and how to measure that, I believe there's massive ROI. I mean, one of the projects I'm doing right now is every paid speaking gig that I get, I'm tracking it back to a relationship that I built. And the crazy thing was, you asked me before the show started, you actually asked me, about speaking. And I said, one of the most powerful things to do as a speaker is just to get out there and speak at all of your local meetups and at coffee shop associations. And one of the things that I'm starting to find out is that all of these speaking gigs that I'm getting in 2017, a mass majority, 75% of them, I can almost link back to a relationship that I built or an event that I attended in 2014 and 2015 that were either free or were not very well paid. But by doing that, the ROI ended up being 2 years later, I'm making $10,000 to $20,000 a speaking gig because of these relationships. And that's where I look at ROI. So I will take on every single, there's no ROI in digital or social or live video. I will take on every one of those challenges because I believe you're not willing to look at the right place. You're not looking at the data, and you're not defining what success looks like correctly when you're building out your strategies in this environment.
Well, you said two great words there, Brian. Long game.
Yes.
That's what people are not playing, the long game. They want that immediate ROI, and literally within 3 months they just ditch the whole project and forget about it. I mean, how many Twitter feeds have you seen, Brian, when you look at it and they posted in 2015 and then a year later they did another post and it's just like, don't have it. Take your platform down. It looks bad.
I will change who I purchase a product from because of that, because I'm like, wow, they don't care enough to update their profile or engage where I'm at. Why would I think they care about the product and care about creating a great experience for me. And that's a massive mind shift. I mean, I talk about this a lot with my phone carriers, but I was a customer of AT&T for 9 years, and I still am a customer on the business side. But when T-Mobile started kind of blowing up, and T-Mobile was having kind of their big environment, and kind of taking over here in the States, Jean Legier, the CEO of T-Mobile, he gets on live stream 4 or 5 times a week. He has a cooking show on Sundays. He's very engaged. He's tweeted back and forth. He was trolling me about a week ago on Twitter, giving me a hard time about, he said my yellow shoes need to be replaced by his purple shoes. But the reason I'm saying that is when I needed to purchase 2 more cell phone plans for my company, I didn't even hesitate to go with T-Mobile because I had a relationship with them. And the interesting thing was I couldn't even have told you if the CEO of AT&T was a female or a male. And I think that impacted my decision on where I'm spending my money, because although my T-Mobile plan might be a little bit spottier than my AT&T plan, and I know John, if he's listening on Periscope, probably would not like to hear that. But for me, I believe in what he's doing. I can relate with him. I understand that he has tapped into the world and tapped into the community. And I mean, it's chapter 1 of my book that's coming out. The reason I made it chapter 1 and the reason this was so important is the chapter title is simple. It says, "The future of business is community." And I so full-heartedly believe that. And John was doing that with T-Mobile. He got me to be a customer with 2 more lines where you would have thought traditional business, I was a customer of another company for 9 years, never really had a problem. I like AT&T. Their service was good. It was the original iPhone grandfathered in. But for me, just doing the average and just providing me the basics was not enough for me to purchase my next plan with them. I went somewhere that cared and someone that was investing in the community.
Love that, Brian. I totally agree. And I'm just thinking about I made a little note. You mentioned about the UK and Europe and getting on board with this kind of thing. Just to let you know, we've got a population of 65 million. Okay, doesn't sound many. Okay, for you, but 40 million of them are on social media. Okay, the one thing I think we're behind in is you've got things like South by Southwest, social media marketing. Well, I'd love to see something of that scale over here in Europe.
Well, I tell you what, I was just talking. I have a good friend over there. Her name is Vicky Taylor, and I'll make sure to get you her Twitter handle for the show notes. But Vicky is really tapped in as a digital marketing agency owner in the UK, and she's been attending numerous events over the last couple months. And so we were going back and forth on Twitter, and she was saying how excited she was that it's starting to happen. Right, the events are happening. I know Chris Ducker, who is the solopreneur. He has a podcast, and it's called the Youpreneur Show. He's bringing his event from Australia to the UK. I spoke at the Business Rocks event last year. I know that, and it's funny that you say that, because I do agree with you that all there really needs to do is there just needs to be pull all of those attention all into one location, and you'll start to realize and look around that, hey, we're all doing some pretty cool things. And on top of the fact that we're doing some pretty cool things, if we come together, it's chapter 2 of my book, and I'm not trying to plug only the book, but chapter 1 is the future of business is community, and chapter 2 is the foundation of innovation is collaboration. And if you want to innovate in the future, you need to collaborate not only with your employees and your customers, but with your peers, and in some cases, your competition. Because your competition, if you together rise the bar of expectations and how much people are willing, in the speaking industry, this is really big, right? If all the speakers work together, and I'm part of a couple big associations, if we all work together to convey our ultimate value for our clients and understand that, hey, this is how we're going to tell our story, we're all going to increase the amount of money that brands and events are willing to pay speakers. Therefore, we all benefit. And I think, in the UK, I can see that as a trend. And I bet you, at the end of 2018, we're going to be talking about, 15 to 20 large events. I mean, Web Summit is one that's already, fairly huge there, I think it's in Lipson, or where's it at? Is it Lisbeth, right? Or where? I can't remember where Web Summit is, but yeah. And then I went to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona twice. That event is, if you are in to me, it's actually better than CES. Mobile World Congress has 75,000 to 100,000 people. but the true innovation in mobility and Internet of Things. What happens at Mobile World Congress is one of my favorite events, and that's in Barcelona. So I agree with you, but I also think we're going to see that shift really quickly because I tell you what, the UK is hot and heavy, and I'm excited for that. And you know, if you have an event and you want me to speak there, you know, definitely reach out because I really do enjoy helping to empower. I always say I can take my American approach at telling your story and bragging that we're really good about here. I can do that with you guys because you're already doing great things. You're really passionate about your story. You just aren't as good at putting it out there forward as a lot of other people are. And so I think it's an exciting time for the UK in the digital space, especially.
Definitely. Maybe in 2018, Brian, we could do something. But you remember in terms of collaboration what Vanilla Ice said, don't you?
Stop, collaborate, and listen.
You got it, man.
That actually is the first line of my blog post from Monday. So how funny is that?
Excellent. Well, Brian, listen, we're on like 45 minutes, so thanks very much for your time. It's been excellent. We must get you back on, but safe travels on your journeys, and we'll hope to catch up soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. And yeah, and if your listeners, check out FOMO Fans, FOMOFANZ with a Z at the end. It's my solo podcast. I've done 31 episodes. And if you're a tech geek, if you're into kind of geeking out about a wide range of technology, I've hosted another podcast for 4 years. It's called Smack Talk. It's SMACTALK, and it stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. And so I have a co-host, Daniel Newman, and we kind of banter back and forth. But I know, great podcast communities and great podcast listeners are always looking for new podcasts. So I would love for you guys to jump on board and stay tuned. The book will come out this fall. I'll be speaking all around the world, and I'm always looking for new speaking opportunities. So I appreciate you reaching out. I'm glad we were able to put this together and grabbing me on the show. And if you ever need anything from me or you want to have me back, let's make it happen.
You bet. And remember, everybody listening, you've got to tweet Brian. He put it out there. He will respond.
I did. It's a guarantee, and I will back it up. And if I don't, feel free to blast me in public. I will own that.
Okay. Cheers, Brian.
All right. Cheers.
That was our man, Brian Fanzo, plugging in a pressure washer, connecting it up to a vat full of liquid gold and spraying you with outstanding content. Brian is a machine. He's one of a kind. There's plenty of content out there. If you'd like to know more about Brian, drop me a tweet at industry_angel. Let me know how you find the episode. Check out industryangel.com for more amazing episodes, such as the interview I did with Ted Rubin, who we mentioned just then. Let me know how you find the show. Hit that subscribe button. Show me some love. So until next time, I'm Ian Farrer. This is the Industry Angel, and thanks for listening.